I'm also joined by Miss Bean Nguyen. She is our college and career counselor, our fabulous one at Elisa Niguel High School. So she will be here supporting us as well. And we welcome you tonight to our college essays expert panel. We are super, super excited about our webinar today. It's going to be a brand new format, and we've got some great panelists that you all will be excited about. So without further ado, we welcome you to our webinar, and our format is a little bit different today. Usually we've had a presentation prepared for you all, but with regards to college essays, we know we've had lots of different discussions, and we really wanted to zone in on the questions that you specifically have. And so we were able to send out and also add a link for you to ask us your questions. We have not been able to get to all of them, but we have formatted these questions by topics. And so on the slide today, you will see what the 4 different topic areas are, and we will have each of our panelists speak to each question. At the end of the webinar, if we do have additional time, then we'll take additional questions and answers. And just as an FYI, our chat is disabled for our webinar tonight, but you can go ahead and ask any questions you may have through the Q&A feature. And with that, I am going to bring our amazing panelists onto the screen. So today we are joined by UC Irvine, University of Chicago, and the University of Southern California. These amazing admissions representatives have given up their time to be with us tonight. So I'm going to let Huma start us off, and she will introduce, each of our panelists will introduce themselves.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Huma Medinawala. I am the Director for First Year Outreach at UC Irvine in our undergraduate admissions office. I'm really excited to be here with you all today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bernice Campos. I'm an Assistant Director of Admissions at the University of Chicago, specifically for undergraduate admissions as well. And I'm also really excited to hear your questions and hopefully get some of those answered tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessie Beeman. I'm an assistant director at USC. I oversee not only first-year recruitment, but transfer recruitment as well. Southern Orange County is part of my territory, and fun fact, I'm also an alum of Capo Unified, so very excited to be here today.
Thank you all. We are so excited for you to be here as well. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. Our first section is titled Purpose and What Are Colleges Looking For? And so our very first question to all of you is to start us, what is the purpose of a college essay? So in other words, what are colleges looking for when they are reading the essay portion of the college applications?
I can start us off. So I think the UC system is a little bit different in that our college essays come in the form of personal insight questions. So they're a little bit different. They're not intended to be an essay, but really be short responses to 4 of the 8 questions that students can pick from. What we're looking for is just to learn about the student. The UCs receive hundreds of thousands of applications. We unfortunately are unable to interview all of our students, and so we treat these questions like interview questions on paper, and it's our opportunity to further get to know you, learn about the things that you're passionate about, and the things that you would be bringing to our campus. So yeah, that's a little bit about us and the PIQs.
Yeah, I can also give my insight here. For UC College, it's going to look a little bit different. So our application does require 3 different essays. The first one is going to be a personal statement, which many schools will require. And this one is to get to know the student a little bit more. There are a variety of different prompts that they can choose to answer, which might ask about either some challenges that they've overcome. But really the purpose is to get to know the student kind of by using their own voice and really by whatever it is that they like to share with us. We also do have 2 supplemental essays, which several schools will also require, and those also have their own purpose, one of which is the Why U Chicago essay. And this one is to get to know a little bit more why the student is interested in applying to U Chicago. So we certainly like to see detail. We like to see kind of through the lens of the students writing how they would view themselves on our campus, and really good to see that they've done a little bit of research and they know what kind of school we are. And then the second supplemental essay is our extended essay, where students are able to choose from a variety of different prompt offerings and answer a question. So many of those questions are going to be in theme of kind of a creative question with not really a right or wrong answer. And within this essay, it's a really great way for us to get a better assessment of how the student would fit in socially. So since we are highly selective, academics are going to be a big piece of, again, whether a student's going to be successful, but we're looking for a little bit more, which is going to be kind of that social fit or fit factor. So each one of them kind of has its own purpose for us.
Yeah, similar for USC, kind of echoing what everyone else has said. It does sound a bit cliche, but these written parts are truly your voice to the admission committee. It's really the section of the application that you have like the most complete control over. So kind of just think of it as a chance for the admission committee to get to meet you. You can think of it as like an opportunity to communicate your curiosities, interests, to really show the reader how certain circumstances or obstacles have like shaped you, or just to kind of show what kind of contributor you could be to campus and what your community will look like. So echoing what everyone else has said for sure.
Thank you. And for our next question, which is, very popular, our students are spending loads and loads of time, especially on these essay sections. So from an evaluation perspective, what weight does the college essay have compared to grades, test scores, and extracurriculars as you all read holistically? So if you can talk a little bit about how much weight is given to this essay portion, that would be really helpful.
I think that's a great question. For the University of California campuses, we have 13 approved comprehensive review factors. So we use a holistic approach when we're looking at UC applicants. So we don't necessarily have a weight per each section of the application. However, we're looking at everything from the lens of adding value and adding context to a student's application. So your academics are absolutely important, as are the other things that you're involved in, and the personal insight questions, or our version of the college essay, is really just to continue to elaborate and implore and help us learn more about you, but also expanding on some of those other areas, right? If you're super interested in a specific subject or other subjects beyond your major, that is sort of your area to do that. So it goes beyond just the academics and the extracurriculars. So on our end, there's not necessarily a specific weight on each one. We're looking at everything in the context of a student's application.
Yeah, we actually follow a very similar review process where we are reading contextually and taking every piece of the application into consideration. So that would, of course, cover transcripts, look at academics, extracurriculars, and essays. But something I often tell students is that a lot of our applicants academically would do well on campus, which I know isn't always great to hear, but we do emphasize again for students to take their time when it comes to the essays for that social fit piece. And equally, when it comes to the extracurriculars, that is going to overlap slightly with our community fit piece. So also looking at the involvement of the student and whether they're going to enjoy their time on our campus, right? So students are also, going to be community members. They're still going to hopefully be involved in different extracurriculars that they enjoy doing that are not in the classroom. So hoping that the student, again, would also enjoy other elements of the campus. So we look at everything, but again, many times the essays are going to be the best way for students to stand out.
Yeah, USC is also very similar. We are also reviewing applications holistically. Usually for this, I always tell students that academic can only really tell us so much. USC is another school where we're going to get a lot of applicants that have really great grades. If we admitted every student with a 4.0 or above, we would probably have 10 times the class that we were aiming for. So because of that, really the way that we weed out all of those kids with really good grades is really through those qualitative pieces. So the essays and the writing, they really do matter. And again, kind of echoing the purpose, it's really just to see who the person is behind the application, looking for who can contribute to campus, who can benefit from resources, or just overall will fit into our student population. So paying really close attention to that personal narrative, because grades alone can't really show that.
Thank you. Right. Moving on to content and some topics that students write about in these essays. So do you have to talk about overcoming a challenge or doing something really big? Or can it be something important to you even if it's on a smaller scale?
I think this is another really great question because I think a lot of times students think that they have to think of an adversity for the sake of coming up with an adversity instead of really showcasing their authentic experiences. I think there is a lack of emphasis around really highlighting some of the positive experiences and a lot of students' accomplishments. A lot of our students are working so hard and involved in so many different things. So I don't think something has to be really big or seismic to be talked about in the personal insight questions. It's more about how it relates to your own experiences, the things that you've done during your time in high school, and how maybe you would like to continue that while you're on our campus, and really just elaborating on those experiences for us to better understand who you are and the things that you've been a part of while you've been in high school.
Yeah, I think this sentiment is a little bit of a misconception where there's, an idea behind the personal statement being this like super grand topic of where students have saved their town and are a hometown hero, or vice versa, where again they have to go through something to talk about in their essay, and that's not the case at all. Again, there's a lot of different ways that students can highlight who they are as a person, and tell us a little bit more about them. So that's, of course, whatever it is that they feel is, something that makes them unique or something that is important to them or has impacted them, to whatever scale that is. So I often give the example of one of the personal statements that has stuck with me, which there's a lot of different ones with different topics, but an essay I always think about is where a student talked a little bit more about the relationship to their guitar and their guitar pick. So it's super simple and kind of silly because it's such a small inanimate object, but the student was able to tell such a deep story about themselves and how music had really impacted their life. And again, we were able to get a better idea of the student's interest, which was playing the guitar, and learn a little bit more about kind of the student's growth through the process of learning music. So it again doesn't have to be this super big important piece that they share with us. It could be super minimal, and we're still going to gather the information, or a little bit more information about them as a student.
Yes, definitely agree with what everyone has been saying. Writing about a challenge is not a requirement. It's not something that colleges are looking for. This was a misconception that I had as a student, and I think students will always continue to sort of feed into this misconception. But I definitely think that students should be writing about what's most important to them. And really just revealing something authentic and meaningful. We want to see things like self-reflection, personal voice, growth, insight, values, and even personality. So even if you're taking something small but significant and exploring why it matters to you, reflecting on what it shows about your character, your values, or your mindset, that can be just as memorable or even more memorable than writing about something as big as like curing disease or climbing Mount Everest. I've read essays as simple as like their use of index cards. Someone wrote one time about losing their favorite pencil. I've had a student write like an acrostic poem of their first name. And I've even had students write about walking through their day, going through like their bus stop and what each stop looked like. So those are things that don't sound like, you know, the big tear catching essays that you would think of, but they still really ended up standing out to me. So yeah.
Thank you for that. I love hearing your examples. I think those are really helpful. So going along with that, what essay themes or stories do you often see, right? So these are some of the ones that we would call cliche types of essays. When I've read essays, I've read a lot on torn ACLs, so I don't know how many torn ACLs you've seen in your career, but should some of these themes be avoided, or, you know, what kind of other insights might you have if it's a somewhat cliche theme?
I have read a lot of personal insight questions on some students who want to become engineers. They usually talk about their love of Legos. So that is definitely a theme. And I'm sure other admissions counselors and readers can probably say similarly. I wouldn't say it's a good or bad thing. I think it's always how you frame it, right? I think even some of the examples that were just shared, it's always about how you frame it and how it relates to you personally. So I wouldn't say themes are a bad thing, but I think specifically to the personal insight questions, because you only have 350 words, sometimes if you're using a theme or you're using a metaphor, it takes so much time to make the connection that it takes away from a student's authentic voice, right? We're really looking for these to be written in I statements. They're meant to be really short. We're not looking for some kind of like a sample of their writing. It's really intended to be straight into the point. And I think sometimes if the theme isn't really well thought out, it can take away and distract from the actual content. So I wouldn't say like on our end that we have a preference one way or the other. I think it's more just about thinking it through and making sure that it's authentic to your experiences and you're really thinking it through because you have such a short amount of space to convey your message.
Yeah, I think that was very well said. I often see essays kind of also like related to athletics where it's like the big game and, you know, maybe the student didn't score the goal when they had, you know, the chance or didn't make the touchdown. So I think those are definitely themes. But I also like understand like for many students these have been pretty impactful moments or they have been moments that again have kind of stuck with them. Again, they're 17, 18 years old writing essays and those pieces might be important to them, right? So kind of how I was just explained, like as long as you do approach it with kind of a positive resolution or talking a little bit more about kind of the reflection piece where you incorporate again your own voice and your own thoughts, that's really what's going to matter. If the student is maybe kind of just dwelling on that specific moment and not getting into, you know, more specifics about kind of the reflection piece or talking a little bit more about themselves, that might be when it's not, you know, the student isn't taking as much advantage of the space that they have. For us, the Common App essay or personal statement has a little bit more space, so about 650 words. But again, sometimes that space isn't utilized to its full potential.
I think at the end of the day, finding a topic that someone hasn't already written about is going to be hard, probably even impossible. So I wouldn't say or try and steer students away from writing about something. Again, kind of echoing other people. If it's important to them, they should be writing about it. Don't worry about if you think it's a topic that has been written before or is a common topic. So just don't focus on other people, focus on yourself. There is one essay that I see quite a bit that students do make, I guess, sort of a mistake on that I do want to touch on now. I've seen this a lot, especially since or post-pandemic, when students talk about their biggest hero, especially if it's like a mom or a dad who worked in healthcare for COVID or something like that. It gets really easy for students to go on and on about why, their mom is so inspiring and everything that their mom has done. Usually by the end of those essays, I'm thinking, dang, I wish their mom applied to USC because I know everything about their mom and I don't know anything about this student. So even if you do pick a topic like that where you're talking about other people in your story, make sure that they're not the focal point and you're always tying it back to you and your experiences, what you learned, things like that. Make sure that other people aren't the focal point of your personal statement.
That's really helpful. We do see a lot of that too. So yeah, that's helpful advice. So kind of switching gears a little bit from content into the style of writing. And I know this does vary across your institutions. Like the UC PIQs are set up as a specific way, like Huma was talking about. So with regards to crafting and writing style, how important is writing style to you when you are evaluating essays?
I think to echo what you said, PIQs are going to definitely be a little bit different. We're not looking at them as a sample of your writing. They're really intended to be short responses. But I think a lot of times students will still try to cram in at like an essay where they're trying to have a hook and a body and a conclusion. And sometimes that's a little tricky when you don't have a lot of space. So I think writing style is important if you feel like you're styling it in a way because that's a reflection of you and your experiences. But I think kind of similar to the themes that we're talking about, we just don't want it to retract from your voice, right? So if it's distracting and taking away from us learning about who you are, I think that's where the style can kind of get lost. For example, we're not necessarily looking for grammar and spelling. Obviously, in an ideal world, even with a couple of grammar and spelling mistakes, we should be able to still read it. But we're not knocking off points or anything like that, or taking away from someone's personal insight question because there's a stylistic element that's missing. That's not really the intent and purpose of the personal insight questions in particular.
Yeah, I would say that for our essays, it is a little bit different. And each one of them, it's gonna look a little bit different in terms of the style the students should approach it in. For the personal statement specifically, this one is probably going to be one of the more traditional structure where again you kind of have an introduction and kind of follow more again a traditional format. Not quite like a research paper, right, where you're like doing research and citing things, but a little bit more traditional. Whereas our other two supplemental essays, when it comes to the YU Chicago essay, we don't have specific guidelines in terms of like how it should be structured, because we want students to kind of approach it in whatever way makes the most sense to them and what comes more naturally. Similarly, with our extended essay, that one specifically is meant for students to approach it in a creative manner. So I always tell students that if they're more so an analytical thinker per se, approach it in that style, or if they're more philosophical, that should be the approach that they take. So they're all going to vary slightly, and I think that's usually the case with most schools.
I think this type of writing that you're doing in like a college admission essay is unlike anything a student has ever really written before. I think the kind of essays and assignments that you're doing, for example, like in an English class, like those may be very great for your English class, but they're not the kinds of essays that we are at least requiring in a college admissions essay. I definitely see that very traditional style a lot, and that's totally okay, but it's not like students are restricted to just doing it the traditional format. There's really no rules when it comes to uploading your personal statement. You can upload whatever you want as long as you're following the question, I guess. So you don't have to be like dramatic or funny or anything that you're not. It should just kind of be like a naturally told story about who you are, or even like what you're going to bring to USC, making it personal. So kind of just think of it as like substance is what you say, style is how you say it. both of them matter. And then I guess other just like tips about writing styles, steering clear of like overtly negative or critical language. It's okay if there's like no happy ending or solution for whatever it is that you're choosing to write about. But think about its connection to how you've developed and how it's influenced your future goals. But just make sure that your unique voice doesn't get edited out. I think that's been said quite a bit. Use words and phrases that you would actually use in everyday conversation. If you're not someone that uses the word like eloquent regularly to your friends, but you think it sounds like such a SAT buzzword and you need to put it in there, like that's great, but we're not looking for big SAT buzzwords. So keep that in mind as well.
That's helpful. With regards to creativity, is creativity appreciated? What are the limits of creativity for a personal statement or the personal insight questions? So this actually came from a real life example to one of our college counselors actually just in the last week, where a student shared a poem with us as their form of a personal statement. So we just thought that this would be perfectly appropriate to ask the three of you. So if you can kind of respond to how creativity plays a role in your essays, yeah.
Yeah, I think I can say in my time I've seen creativity come across in a lot of ways. I've read personal insight questions where a student compared themselves to a Chipotle burrito. I've seen personal insight questions that have been written like a haiku, where they're kind of separating out lines and kind of leveraging a poem to articulate something. And I think I definitely don't want to sound repetitive, but I think the creativity, like for us, you're hearing the student's voice is really important, right? And that's why we emphasize using I statements and really emphasize using your own words and your own experiences and not, having someone else write your personal insight questions or even over editing your voice out of the personal insight questions. I see that a lot where someone's personal insight questions have been edited to the point where their voice is kind of out of it and it's a little bit more structured for the sake of creativity or for it to like sound a little bit more robust. And I think creativity is definitely a reflection of the student and their experiences, but for us, then the personal insight questions, they're really intended to be so direct that I don't think it leaves a lot of room for students to be creative. And oftentimes when students try to force being creative, we're sometimes left missing pieces and not really getting the full picture across by way of that personal insight question. So while, like for the example of the Chipotle burrito, it was great to read. It's stuck with me and I always refer back to that. But I don't necessarily felt like I got a sense of the actual student and how they would have, how they would be articulating themselves in that question. I learned a lot about the metaphor and the connection that they were trying to make, but their experience and their voice didn't necessarily come across in the way that I think they intended to. Which again, for us, we're not deducting points or anything like that for that. Everything is looked at through the lens of value added. So if a student doesn't really convey a whole lot by way of creativity, or if something gets lost, then it's just not necessarily adding value to the application. We just read it for what it is. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful.
Yeah, I think for us as well, the personal statement, it's not necessarily an essay that is meant to be creative. Some students definitely do approach it in that way, and for some it comes a little bit more natural than others. Where I think when students do try to force it, it is when we kind of get lost, or they kind of get lost in kind of trying to can persuade that creativity to come onto the essay. Where our application has other elements where we definitely encourage students to be creative. So within the personal statement, we don't necessarily expect to kind of see that element come through as much because again, we're trying to get a better sense of who the student is from their own voice and their own perspective. So I think some students have demonstrated that they can kind of add those elements to the essay and still be able to talk about themselves where others are maybe not as successful. So not to say that, you know, it's not valued, because we will, again, we'll still read the essay and hopefully get something out of it. But our application specifically will have other pieces later on, like our extended essay or our portfolio piece that kind of opens up the door for creativity.
Yeah, definitely echo, like, is it appreciated? Yes. I wouldn't say there are any limits. My big cop-out answer for this is very much like, it depends. More activity, it can look like so many different things, and I'm just not sure, particularly like in a specific case, like if it would be something that like makes a student stand out more or not. So it can, I wouldn't say rely on it. You should still definitely make sure that you're showing. And first and foremost, make sure that you're paying attention to the essay prompt and actually answering the question. It can be a really creative, eloquently way of, you know, doing whatever you're doing. But if it doesn't answer the question at the end of the day, then you technically haven't followed directions. So also keep that in mind. Like, a poem can be beautiful, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that students, we're getting the clear picture of them. So if they're spending too much time on, you know, the like visual aspect of describing whatever they're describing, and I'm not really getting a clear picture of the student, then maybe that's where I would say that creativity might have hindered the student. So it can, and it can help. It kind of just depends.
You know, I think since we're making good on time, I just wanted to expand a little bit, because each of your 3 campuses has creative elements to your application. So maybe working backwards, Jesse, at USC, there's your supplement that kind of has your one-word answers type. If you can kind of expand on that area, are you looking for a specific way for those questions to be answered? Because it's so short, like your favorite music or your favorite podcast. Like, am I just supposed to answer that question as is, or how do I answer those?
Yes, totally. Great question. So for those that don't know what we're talking about, USC has what's called quick takes. For this, the meaning is really in the name, quick. So kind of as it was alluded to, these are questions like, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite snack? Who would be your ideal fictional roommate? Like things of that nature. I think students get really hung up on these because they're not traditional questions that are asked in a college admissions like application. So they're like, oh, is this a trick? Are they evaluating me on what I'm saying? That kind of thing. And for this, I say you're supposed to have fun with it. In general, like a college application for students can be super stressful. I remember how stressful it was for me filling out my application. Even like just filling out my name and my address, I probably read it 20 times over, making sure I didn't make any mistakes. So these are really meant for students to have fun. There's really no like rhyme or reason behind it. Students can genuinely do one-word answers, or they can write a couple sentences. I believe the like limit is 200 words or something along that line. So it is pretty short. But I say do with it what you will. If you think that answering the question to what's your favorite movie is just putting the movie title, then that's great. Sometimes students put in like really left field things, or maybe things that are meant to be funny. So they feel the need to explain it. Maybe that adds to the funniness of it. Like, again, that's more than welcome. I think I see a big mix of things when it comes to what I'm seeing from students. So there's real no like guidance of what you have to be doing. But yes, they're meant to be fun. If you put that your favorite snack is Fritos and I don't like Fritos, I'm not going to deny you because our snack choices don't align. So have fun with them. Don't spend as much time as you think, because if you spend 10 minutes figuring out what your favorite snack is, that's way too long. You're overthinking it for sure. And I think I'm getting blurry.
Thank you. And Chicago as well. Your extended essays have some really creative prompts in themselves, right? So, like for example, like if you could uninvent one thing, what would it be? Or I think there was like something about
Oh, I have one. I remember What's So Easy About Pie. That's one of my favorites from U Chicago.
Yeah, so UChicago has some really creative prompts. So if you can kind of expand on that section, Bernice, and see, like, are you looking for creativity there? And yeah.
Yeah, certainly. The prompts that we actually release, so every year we release 5 new prompts, but students can choose from our old prompts as well. But those are actually submissions from current students or young alum of the college that have probably just graduated. So we tell students that these are questions that, kids on campus are currently like chatting about or thinking about. Like one example I often give is like, is a hot dog a sandwich, right? So like it's one of those questions that doesn't really have a right or wrong answer. But this is certainly an area or space where we encourage students to be creative, to kind of take it in whatever direction makes the most sense to them. So it is meant to be a little bit of a creative exercise, to think outside the box and how you approach the questions. And a tip I always give students is to not focus just on the new prompts, like play around with different prompts to see like which one excites you the most and which one kind of gets you, in the theme of like wanting to be creative and kind of wanting to expand a little bit more on. So they are meant to be fun. Like I mentioned earlier, these are oftentimes how students stand out in our poll, because they are very much in theme with kind of how the other student body approaches questions of this sort. So kind of that intellectual curiosity that students bring to campus is often seen within these. So we also don't have specific guidelines that we give students on how to approach these questions, for the reason that, again, students can kind of take it in whatever direction makes the most sense to them. We actually don't even have a word limit on these either. So typically I would recommend to kind of stick within the 650 to 800 word limit, just to avoid students writing, 10-page essay. But we again kind of give students a lot of flexibility to be able to kind of make it what they'd like. And some students don't even approach it in an essay like format. Like some students will answer the question in like a PowerPoint, or I've seen a few students do like drawings, and still again addressing the question. So really that's the purpose, but it is certainly meant to be creative.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a tough one. And then for the UCs, there is a question on the PIQs that says every person has a creative side. It can be expressed in many ways. Describe how you express that. So what are you looking for here?
Yeah, I think a lot of times people make the assumption that only creative students should pick that question, or only that's specifically a question for students that want to go into the arts or something really niche and stylistic. However, the question is pretty broad, right? It asks what creativity means to a student, or excuse me, how they express their creativity. And I think creativity can be expressed in a lot of ways. Students who are interested in STEM can also be creative in the things that they're interested in and the things that they're involved in. So I don't think that there's a specific type of response that we're looking for, but instead what we're hoping is that students will broaden their perspective. And when they see that question, they're not thinking, oh, I don't play the piano, or I don't know how to play the violin. Like I can't write about how I express myself creatively, but instead they can talk about other experiences that are creative, right? Like building something, or being a part of like the speech or debate team, and the creative aspects that go into those different types of activities, and how that's a creative outlet for them. I think the key is that it's a form of creative expression for that student, right? And that they're not forcing a connection there, but really they're talking about and sharing something with us in that personal insight question as a form of their expression. So that's really what we're looking for, is for students to kind of broaden their perspective and choose that question if they have other avenues that they're really expressing themselves. But the flip side can be true. If students have a really artistic or creative way that they express themselves, we would want them to write about it if that's a big part of who they are and they want to share that aspect of themselves in the application process.
Right, that was a fun little tangent. So thank you for that. And then we are going to be moving on to our last section, which covers practical and process questions. So the first is, how do you recommend that students get started on their essays? And when should they get started?
Sorry, I forgot we were back to our usual order. I think this is really helpful in the sense that there's a couple of ways that students can do this. The personal insight questions haven't really changed necessarily year over year at this point. I know that a lot of, teachers or school administrators that students work with for the personal insight questions specifically, oftentimes will have students answer all 8 and then say, pick the best 4. I personally think that students should spend more time identifying the questions that resonate with them the most, and then really spend their time investing in those 4 questions instead of taking the time to write all 8 and then picking 4 from there. I think a lot of times that can be a little bit more anxiety inducing and stressful for students versus right out the gate being like, let me look at these 8 questions. Let me think about how I want to answer these and things like that. The University of California has a worksheet, and I can happily drop the link in the chat, but it breaks down each personal insight question by asking very specific questions. And that's a great way to get started, is not even worry about the actual question, but to really go through and look at the sub questions and think, does this resonate with me? Is this a question that I feel like is going to be a good representation of me and my experiences? That's the way that we want those questions to be kind of worked in. When they should start, I think because our application is due in the fall, definitely I think starting in your junior year is helpful, but a lot of times students can have really, pivotal experiences between their junior and senior year. So if students want to wait a little bit, I think that's okay. But I don't think that starting a little bit early is a bad thing either, because it gives you a little bit more time to really think about which questions you want to work on. So yeah, hopefully that kind of clarifies that aspect, but I definitely recommend the worksheet. I can't plug that enough because I think it's a great resource.
Yeah, I would definitely say that for the personal statement specifically, like it was said, the earlier the better, more than likely. I think kind of thinking and studying about different things that might be important to the student might be kind of a helpful start. Maybe setting up an outline of different things that are important to them, or things that they would like to highlight about themselves that might seem, a little bit more important or significant to them. I don't really think there's a right or wrong way of approaching the personal statement. I think it's definitely going to be dependent on the student, and more so again of how they like to approach it, like what topic they want to approach as well. I think junior year or early summer is definitely a good time to at least have a start. Again, our applications also due early or November 1st typically, so like in the fall time. So getting a head start isn't necessarily going to harm anyone at all. So I would say kind of doing an outline at first, kind of getting taking a stab at it, and kind of figuring out again what topic they want to focus on is kind of a good start specifically.
Yeah, for USC, it really depends what deadline you're applying to. To make it even more confusing, we've got like 4 different deadlines. So if you're applying by like early action or early decision, that's a November 1 deadline. So kind of similar timeline that everyone else is saying, probably like junior year, or that summer in between your junior and senior year might be a really good time to get started. Otherwise, other deadlines would be like December 1st or January 10th. So that since those are a little bit later, we're getting more towards like the winter. You might be able to write it at the beginning of your senior year. I would say just generally start writing it earlier than you think, especially if you're someone that's a bit of a procrastinator, which is totally okay because that's me. So definitely try and get started on it earlier than you think so that you can have it done or at least mostly done to like edit and draft and have other people read it and things like that. In terms of like where I think you should get started, yes, echo brainstorm. On the Common App with USC, there are like 7, I believe, different prompts that you can choose from for your personal essay. So find a topic that is really speaking to you and kind of just brainstorm what you want to write about. Not just a topic that you think admissions counselors want to hear, but like, again, we've said it so many times, what's important to you. After brainstorming, you should specify something specific about like the circumstance or topic, the situation that makes this like broad topic stand out to you as influential. And then kind of like lastly, just like honing in on that unique part, making that story uniquely yourself. But yes, in short, earlier the better, and brainstorm.
With that, we might have some in our webinar today who are not yet seniors, kind of thinking forward. But what advice can you give our younger students on finding experiences that they can eventually write about?
Yeah, I think I'm really happy that there are younger students on here. I think it's never too early to start thinking about college. And sometimes, a lot of times, your senior year can feel a lot more overwhelming if this is your first time exploring those options. So for younger students, at least for the University of California application, what we recommend is students actually start a Google Doc, whether that's like right when they start high school, where they're kind of like tracking all of their experiences, whether it's activities, volunteer experience, jobs, internships, summer camps, summer programs, really anything and everything that you can think of, like awards that you get. Just have like a running list, because when it comes to your senior year, you're not going to remember all of the amazing things that you did. And for the UC application, you can include up to 20 different experiences over 6 different categories. So I think if you're trying to figure out which experiences to find, I think it's just exploring what you enjoy, right? If you're someone who's not super passionate about sports, you don't have to participate in sports. There are a lot of other things that you can get into. When we think about getting involved, oftentimes students think that they can only get involved in clubs at their school, but your school may not have something that you're interested in, but there may be other external organizations or affiliations that do, and you can get involved in them and still include that in your application. I think the sky's the limit in what you're interested in. And obviously, we're not expecting in 9th grade for you to know all the things that you're passionate about. I think it's just finding things that you enjoy and exploring them. And then for us, obviously, we're also looking for longevity over volume, right? So we're not necessarily looking for students to be involved in a lot of things for short stints of time. But even if you only have a few things to talk about, but you did it for all 3 or 4 years of high school, or you worked your way up to a leadership position, those are the types of values and things that we want students to think about in their experiences. We're not expecting you to just, keep adding things onto your plate, especially with your academics and things that you might be involved in. We want you to be committed to the experiences that you find, but I think it's really about thinking about what you're interested in, the things that you like to do, and kind of going after that, and not necessarily thinking about it solely from a college lens, but really thinking about what you enjoy, because that passion will come through on the admission side when we're reading your personal insight questions and we're reading your application.
Yes, I don't want to reiterate everything that was just said because that was the perfect piece of advice. But I also really enjoy when some younger students come to sessions or are wanting to hear a little bit more about just college in general, because you do have a little bit more time. And something that I often tell students is to be intentional with your time. Be intentional with how you approach different experiences. Like it was just said, definitely if you are interested in different activities that have a value or that you find a value to, or you are passionate about, that is always going to come or be showcased a little bit more within the application than you joining a bunch of different clubs, senior year, because you kind of panicked that you don't have as many things to add to your list of extracurriculars. So definitely be intentional in the different things that you're involved in. know what you want to do, try new things if that's what you're looking for, but definitely don't feel the pressure of getting involved just for the sake of getting involved. Especially, I know there's a little bit of a pressure to, again, take on a bunch of different things on your plate, again, just for the college application, which isn't necessary. Again, like we all review holistically, so there's going to be a lot of different pieces that will make your application strong. But definitely think about the things you get involved in. Enjoy those things. If it's sports, if it's student government, if it's within your community, as long as you're enjoying what you're doing, that's going to be showcased on your application.
Actually get this question very frequently. I just got asked it by a parent the other day for their 10-year-old child. So I get this regularly. I've got a couple of different pieces of advice. Some of them have definitely been said, and I'm going blurry again. My webcam is like crazy. Excuse me. I'll just talk and you can see me being blurry. The first thing I always say is don't chase perfect experiences, really just kind of like focus on growth. College essays or just your application in general isn't just really about impressing. We really want to focus on the reflection aspect. So like you don't need to start some like nonprofit or cure a disease, that kind of thing. Just like reflect regularly after each new experience, kind of just like take a moment to ask yourself, like, what did I expect? What actually happened? What challenged me? How did I grow? Would I do it again? Just questions kind of like that to really get you in that mindset. The next piece of advice would, again, it's kind of already been said, just be curious, try things, even if you're not good at them or before you know that you're good at them. Even if you don't need to be the best in what you're doing. You just kind of need to be engaged and again, reflective. Colleges kind of just want to see students who take that initiative and can grow from what they do. So that's also very important. This is just like a personal thing that I did and a lot of my friends did that we found very helpful for us, is keeping a journal. I think that was kind of said with like the Google Doc sort of thing, keeping notes for yourself, but you don't have to like obviously write your essays yet, especially if you're 10 years old, but just jot down like what you did, how it made you feel, what you learned, any like aha moments, things of that nature. And then this will make it a lot easier later down the road to recall specific details and insights when you are actually writing those essays. Another one is just like seeking impact and not necessarily prestige. Colleges care more about something that shaped you rather than kind of just like where it took place. So even if you think something as simple as like volunteering at your local food pantry doesn't sound like all hoity-toity, building those relationships can be more meaningful than some sort of like flashy like program that you did for a day that maybe you didn't even really connect with. And then lastly, we've said it so many times, but I want to reiterate it, just like be yourself. Focus less on like checking boxes and more just about being real and growing. That's really what we're looking for.
It's so nice when it comes from you all too, because I feel like we're all kind of giving the same message. But our last question for the night is, do you have any recommendations or for resources to help students? And for the UC, the PIQ worksheet that Huma talked about, Ms. Nguyen did drop that in the chat. So anything like that for each of your schools or anything additional for the UCs?
I think the worksheet, I know I guess I jumped a little ahead and mentioned that a little earlier, but I would say the worksheet's definitely a great place. I think I kind of saw this in the chat too as well, around like using AI and outside sources and resources. We do get a lot of questions about that, and I think my biggest piece of advice for students is if you're using like AI or ChatGPT or hiring someone to help you with your personal insight questions, it's essentially defeating the purpose of what we all kind of talked about. I think the common theme among all of our applications is we're looking to learn more about you. And if you're using outside resources or outside sources, it's taking away from your voice and your authenticity. So while using like ChatGPT or some form of AI, can be a resource as far as like giving you maybe some talking points or helping you talk about a specific activity that you want to talk about or a specific thing. It shouldn't be a single source because you don't know where it's citing those sources from. And we are looking to see that in the process. So if there is a high overlap with some type of writing source, that can definitely impact you in the UC process before your application has even been reviewed for admissions purposes and things like that. So I think outside resources are helpful, but if you're relying on them to be a single source, that can definitely take away from your authenticity and your voice, which is what we're looking for.
Yeah, one of the things I often like to plug is going to be the virtual presence of many colleges. Well, specifically for the personal statement, I know that's going to be a little bit more focused on the student, but we actually do a workshop every so often. I think we do it every couple months, but specifically kind of focusing on the personal statement. So kind of walking through the tone, the topic, and really how to approach the personal statement. So it's really focused on that. And there's also a Q&A open. So if students have more specific questions, they can always ask those directly. So many colleges, I'm sure, will also have similar resources or at least have more information on how to approach specific essays. We also do a few other virtual like essay writing workshops for our supplemental essays because we do know that those are so specific and oftentimes students have questions. So we have a few different kind of avenues to find those resources. So definitely check out the virtual presence of different colleges. Their websites, of course, have a lot of information that could be very helpful and kind of give you tips on how to approach them.
This one's a little bit USC specific. I'm gonna drop it in the chat right now. I'm a little biased personally, but this is our undergraduate admission blog. The reason why I'm biased is because I'm the editor-in-chief of it, so I oversee pretty much everything that gets posted there. But it truly is a really great resource for students, not even just about like learning more about USC, but there is a tab in there that goes over application advice. We do have a lot of blogs that go over different components of the application. So there's one about like crafting your activities list, one about utilizing the additional information section, even one kind of going over the anatomy of a high school transcript and how we are reviewing students academically. There obviously are other blogs that are outside of just applications, so it's a great way for students to get to know a little bit more about USC, but specifically, I feel like the blogs that perform the best are usually the application advice ones, so I highly recommend using those resources.
Thank you. And then I know that UC Irvine touched on this, but if Chicago and SC could also touch on, like, are you able, this was a question that came through in the chat, but are you able to tell, or readers, can they tell when something has been professionally written, ghost written, or AI generated? Like, do you do reverse searches on some of those, or yeah?
Yeah, I can touch on this first. USC does have their own AI that detects AI. So yes, we can tell. Even without that, I feel like I'm usually a pretty good judge of character about being able to tell if something is AI generated. Usually there's just like a little thing in my head that goes off. Even there are multiple parts in the Common App where students are writing. So if their voice in the personal statement doesn't match their voice for like their short answers or even how they're writing about like their activities, that's where some red flags really start going off for me in terms of like, did someone else write this for them? Did they have like a lot of people editing this for them? Like that kind of thing. So usually I would say it is pretty easy to tell because there's just a lot of inconsistencies or I'm just a detective like that, I guess.
Thank you. I think we had a connection issue with Bernice, but she should be coming back on. So yeah, that's really helpful because sometimes we ask for a lot of outside help and we find that our students' voices are getting lost. So really, I do feel like that was highlighted today, that the student voice is the most important. There's also an interesting, so that concludes all of the prepared questions we had. We have an interesting question in the chat. Before we get into it, we just wanted to put a plug out there for our families that we do have our college fair coming up. So this is the time that you will be able to connect with our representatives. So UC Irvine and Jesse from USC will also be there. So please join us on October 4th at 11 at San Juan Hills. So there's an interesting question that I did want to put out there in the chat. How do we talk about diverse experiences when DEI is such a politically precarious moment right now? Do you have any feedback or insight about that?
You go, Hema. I'll go after.
Okay. I was gonna say, I don't mind if you want to go first. Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I know it's such an interesting time in the world that we're in, and students may feel like they shouldn't or can't talk about their DEI specific experiences, but I think that that's still part, or we think that that's still part of a student's experience. You know, a lot of our campuses are really diverse campuses. We want students from all backgrounds and identities to feel like this is a safe space for them. And I think their application process is their opportunity to talk about those experiences and share those authentically. Just to be very clear, during the application process, we don't see any sort of personal identifying information like name, gender, race, things like that, nor do we include that in our admissions process, nor have we. So I think it's really important for students to feel comfortable sharing that. Like I shared earlier, everything is in the context of their environment and it's intended to be in their voice and reflect their experiences. If those experiences are a part of their high school journey that's led them here, then we would want to definitely hear about that.
That was very well put. The reason I didn't want to go first was because I was pulling up the Common App. Because there is a specific prompt that you can reply to. So for the personal essay, you have a few prompts that you can select from. The very first one, which is honestly one of the most common ones that I see students reply to, I'll read it word for word. It says, some students have background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story. So the application itself is inviting you to write about your identities or backgrounds or things like that if it's something that you want to do. So I definitely would never tell a student not to write about anything. If you find it very important to you and it's something you want the admission committee to know, write about it. I know that this can be a little bit of a hot topic, especially with like Supreme Court decisions and such like that. Just know that while race isn't something that is going to be a part of like an admission decision, you are your own person and your experiences are yourself. Those things are factual. So write about them if you so please. And if it's a great way for us to get to know you, then I definitely want to hear more.
Thank you. Yeah, and I heard another college say, remember that the Supreme Court decisions, like the onus and the direction and directive on that has been given to the universities. It's not for the students. So the students should feel free to share their experiences as it pertains to those topics. So one last question as we kind of wrap up. I know we're kind of we're past our time. So one last question for us. There was one question that asked, okay, what makes you feel that an applicant is a good or bad one based on what they write? And I know that you would never say that there's a bad applicant, right? But maybe what might be a good value added essay versus not so much value added?
Yeah, I think the personal insight questions, because we're doing a holistic review, it's not the only thing that our recommendation is based off of. We're looking at everything in the context of that student's environment. So a personal insight question is either going to add value or it's just not adding a whole lot of value in the application. I think where we sometimes miss something is when we feel like the student is kind of like sharing new information in the personal insight question, but they're maybe not sharing it in their own words, or they're sharing it in a form of a story that doesn't really give us a whole lot of like information about themselves, right? They're not, like we kind of talked about earlier, they're talking about someone else, or someone else is kind of the focal point, even though the story is about them. Like that's an example that I can think of. So I wouldn't really say that that's like a sole reason for a student not being admitted to our institution. I think that's just an example where a student maybe isn't leveraging the personal insight question to talk about themselves, or use I statements to clarify who they are and what they're going to bring to our campus, but instead really focusing on someone else, or a specific experience, which can be a very profound moment, and sometimes that's helpful. But I think it's also connecting it back to the question and making sure that you're answering what the question is really asking. Whereas I think a lot of times students get lost in telling a story, and then they've missed the mark on addressing and really answering the question and showcasing like their experiences, which is what we really want to get to know them personally. So I know Jesse shared this earlier, but like it depends is really like a quintessential admissions counselor answer. And it really just depends on each individual student. It depends the question that they're picking. It depends on what they're choosing to write about. So whether or not it's adding value is going to look different depending on the individual student and how they've like which question they've chosen and how they've chosen to answer it.
That was so amazing. Ditto to everything that was just said. Stole some of the words out of my mouth. I was definitely going to say it depends all over again. I think a lot of the times students and families don't understand how important context can be as well. And a lot of that context we may have as admissions counselors that are experts for regions. USC has like regional territories, so I oversee specific parts of the United States. So because of that, I'm aware of a lot of context, but also there's a lot of things that aren't made obvious in your essay or your transcript that can really make or break an application. So if something isn't already made obvious and it is important, so for example, like a grade trend, or maybe you have perfect grades, but something was going on like personally, and you just want to speak about like balancing those things. Like that's really important context that while I'm just looking at your grades, I'm not necessarily thinking like, wow, this student was able to achieve all A's in all of these APs and while dealing with all this stuff. So context is really an important thing that can make maybe like an application that isn't standing out to me as much. Whereas when I'm understanding the context more, it's actually like blowing me away a lot more than it can. So it depends. My Idaho students are so much different than my Orange County students, so it depends.
Yeah, and Bernice, I see you here. So is there anything else that you'd like to add to that?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry, I got disconnected for a second, but I was able to come back. I think a lot of great information has already kind of been shared, but one thing I often kind of tell students is that we do review contextually, and every single piece is of course going to be taken into consideration based on the context, but oftentimes the tone of how students write tells a little bit more about their character. So it does sound a little bit cliche, but we also do want to admit kind students to our campus and good community members. So our Dean of Admissions sometimes says that we might deny the valedictorian who, who has changed the world, but if they're not going to be a good community member or a nice student on our campus, that might be something that we think about, right? Because we're also trying to admit students who are going to be good lab partners, who are going to be good community members as a roommate. So especially when it comes to the personal statement, when students are sometimes talking a little bit more about maybe some of their achievement or different things that they've accomplished, if we do get a bit of a sense of a tone where they're maybe talking down on other students or bringing other students down, I think that is something that we sometimes do have concern over, because again, we want students to be able to be in the classroom and hear different perspectives that might not be exactly the same as their own, but be respectful when hearing those. So I think that was maybe one of the things that wasn't fully covered. A lot of other things were already mentioned, so that was kind of my little add-on.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you for that. So out of, honoring our panelists' time, we just wanted to thank all of you so much for joining us today and giving us your insight. Really from, these really selective universities. We're so lucky to have you guys. So thank you so much. And to our families, again, we invite you to join our college fair, where you'll get to have more of your questions answered. Our college counselors will also be there as well. So thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.